Aric, what kind of property you want to buy?
I want a B-class property.
I want to sell a finance property.
I want something with like 48 units.
Dang. That's what we're talking about today.
Welcome to the Utah Real Estate Show podcast, the show where two agents and a lender teach real estate best practices by talking through mistakes we've seen and made.
So we went in and started renovations. My partners did, right? They started renovations right away. Essentially treated it as a flip, but we were going to refinance it. But at the time, the refinance, that stage presented itself where we just knew we didn't want to keep it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Utah Real Estate Show. I am Tyler Cazier, Utah Real Estate Agent.
Jason Christiansen, mortgage lender.
Aric Wiszt, Utah Real Estate Agent. And we have our special guest, Rusty Pollard here. He is our multifamily professional expert.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we want to start off a little bit and give our audience a context of who you are. So Rusty, you've got a few units, right? How many units do you have and where are they?
I'm rented 100 units across four different states, and starting to get some more commercial units as well.
And how long have you been investing in multifamily?
In multifamily, probably about 8 years. I just had a Google memory pop up on my photos.
Oh yeah,
that's cute. When we got our first key for our first house while we were here going to school. 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
and it was a multifamily. Were you living in that?
Yeah, it had a basement apartment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, did it ramp up for you, or was it kind of been a pretty steady incline since 10 years ago to your 100 doors now?
It was a slow build for sure. I initially went to work at a large corporation, and my whole plan was to work there for 10 years and then, retire on my portfolio. And I lasted a couple years. I got a little anxious, but it's certainly grown faster since I've kind of gained my footing after I left the big corporate world.
So was your design when you bought your first home to invest in real estate?
Yes, 100%.
From the very get-go, you're like, we're doing this the investor way.
Even as a kid, I always wanted to invest.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I moved one time as a kid, and I begged my parents to keep that first house. I was like, "That's a good rental. You guys should keep it." It's kind of weird.
How old were you?
I was like Beethoven.
You were 12.
And you already had rentals figured out.
Yeah. I didn't have it figured out, right? I still don't have it figured out, but I always had my eye on it.
I consider myself sort of a financial nerd because I would invoice my dad for my allowance.
No.
But that was just because I'm a nerd, right? And so, but I rarely find other people who are like kids talking about financial decisions.
Yeah.
So that resonates with me.
It was kind of weird, but yeah.
Well, I knew I was a weird kid. So we get along well.
Wear a scarf indoors.
That explains a few things for me. Okay, well, so we're talking tonight about multifamily, right? And how do you do it? How do you get into it? All that kind of stuff. But before we get started in this whole thing, I want to do a story time with Rusty. Because I heard a story recently about a certain house. I won't identify the city because I don't want to embarrass anyone or anything. But a certain house in another state that did not go well. And on the show, we talk about things not going well all the time. And so in this situation, will you tell us a little story about this house that didn't quite go as planned?
Yeah, it took a minute for me to think of one to tell, because in general, I'm pretty conservative in my investing, honestly. Probably more so than most Utah investors. But this one kind of stuck out to me just because it gave me a lot of lessons learned. So we had started my partners and I had started getting into multifamily, and we were like, let's get a little bit more creative with the structuring. So we brought in some private investors to act as the note holders on this wholesale duplex. And one unit was rented out and the other unit was down to the studs. And so this was a good test for us to learn how to renovate properties.
The story's starting good,
right? This is in Colorado, so it's a state away, and none of us were local. So we were finding contractors that were going to do the project for us, and we structured the whole project all with private money, so we had no money out of pocket. It was kind of cool. So going into it, the numbers looked awesome. and we were planning on just kind of doing a burr type approach, and just hanging on to it. Get a couple units that cash flowed with no money down would be a great deal for anyone, really. And as we got into it, anytime you inherit tenants, that can be a little hairy. And so we had a little trouble there. The renovations actually went pretty well. We moved the staircase outside and all of that, like from inside the house to outside to create an exterior entrance and all that. But the renovations went pretty well. But we just came to find out that the city wasn't, specifically that neighborhood wasn't a place we wanted to be in long term. And so we thankfully had...
So diplomatic.
Yeah,
Come on.
I know.
So how
There
did
was
you-
drugs. Okay, let's just get it out there. It was not.
There were you would walk down the sidewalk and there were needles and syringes everywhere. Like it was
man.
bad.
So how long did you own the home before you were like, wait?
After the upstairs was renovated and rented out, probably 2 months, and we were like, we're done. We can't handle it. So we found out, talking to some of the landlords in the neighborhood, that this was just not a great place. And the landlord next to us told us, he's like, hey, I've done my own rushes on houses to break up drug rings and stuff because the cops wouldn't do anything. They said, we don't have any room in the jail, so you're on your own. We don't have anything. We'll just take their name down and turn them loose.
Wait, so how come you didn't walk the street before you bought it?
We rushed into this one. We didn't do enough due diligence.
All right.
It truly was, hey, let's just try this out.
So now when you're buying a house, like, do you walk the neighborhood? Like, what do you do? Because like
There are
still
still
doesn't.
multiple
Yeah.
properties that I haven't ever set foot on.
So what is one of the things that you learned? Because, it's not necessarily you probably could have still made money in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But you chose to get out of that. Did you have an exit strategy planned for your rentals? Do you have one more now planned?
Thanks for leading me to that. Yeah. So that's kind of where our investing always goes, is having multiple exit strategies. So that property, we did have multiple exit strategies. If it didn't work out as a burr, we still could make money off of a flip kind of situation. And so we ended up selling that one, and it worked out great. Our investors were stoked, and we made money without doing any manual labor or any work.
What was your total holding period? How long did you hold this property?
Probably 4 months. Yeah.
Okay, so month 2, you're like, I'm done. Like, we don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And month 4, you're like,
Quick.
we're gonna sell this thing.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was quick.
Wow.
So we went in and started renovations. My partners did, right? They started renovations right away. And essentially treated it as a flip, but we were going to refinance it. But at the time, the refinance, that stage presented itself where we just knew we didn't want to keep it.
This isn't gonna go the way we thought.
Yeah.
How many partners did you have? You said most of this was...
Yeah, so I've done a lot of deals with a buddy of mine and his wife, and obviously my wife's been involved, so it's just 2 couples. We've done
Really?
a lot of projects together.
So you really had just like the 2 couples that were the general partners.
Yep.
Were there, and I'm assuming there's limited partners as well?
Those were just private investors acting as the note holders on that one.
And how many note holders did you have for this property?
That one was just one.
Just one?
Yeah.
And he was carrying the whole thing?
Yeah. But then we had a bit of a history with our investing projects.
Okay.
We could kind of show that and say, this is what we typically do.
We're good at this.
Yeah.
Here's our resume. Like,
Yeah.
I do this often.
Yep.
Okay. So he trusted you enough to be like, okay, yeah, like we'll put this up. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's not going to go buy a drug house.
Hey, by the way, we're selling this right away.
We're going to sell this immediately. So how much did you tell the note holder? Or did you say anything to the note holder?
No, we just said, hey, we've decided to pivot on this one. And they were good with a quicker payout. So
All right.
with that.
Already, so what I've learned is be very diplomatic. Like he's
super...
everything's
so
like super
good.
close to the vest.
Yeah.
You don't have to edit this podcast.
No, I leave a lot of the stuff in. What we don't, it'll make it into the bloopers, which is great. But Well, this is okay. So that actually, you talked about multiple lessons learned, right? Obviously, one of them was have multiple exit strategies. In this case, there was a strategy for a BRRRR, or strategy for a flip, and strategy for a long-term hold, just like okay. What are some of the other lessons that you acquired through this diplomatic trial of your faith?
You know, playing around with creative financing is always, I'm always learning something new, right? You can, as you know, you can do it 1,000 different ways, you know?
Yes.
This really cemented my drive for being extra conservative on my numbers, just in case something does go south. Like, I still want to come out, and I don't want to crash and burn hard on any one project. You know, there might be some that are a little flatter than others, but I'm not a speculative investor at all. I just do what I know and feel comfortable with it, and just
Stay
go for
with it and just turn it until money starts printing. And then I'm happy.
That's right.
Okay, that's a good way to do it.
So, like, what do you look for when you're structuring a deal? Like, you say creative financing, like, what are your main go-tos? What do you like?
As far as creative financing, I do a lot of seller financing. I've actually just refinanced out of one seller finance on an apartment complex, a 48 unit, and then I've got a 23 unit that's also seller financed. We just got that end of last year. So I love seller finance deals, and that's a great deal for most sellers, depending on their situation. You know, it's been a great win for all of those sellers that I've worked with. They can spread out their capital gains burden over multiple years, potentially keeping them, like I mentioned before the podcast started. The first property we bought was an old lady that was retiring, and she had a couple of rental properties, and she was very specific. She knew what she was going to be getting in her retirement money, and she wanted to stay below a certain threshold on the tax bracket, right? And so spreading her capital gains over multiple years allowed her to stay under, because she had several pieces in play. And so that was a great win for her to not only gain interest income, but to spread out her gains.
Did she come to you with the seller finance idea, or did you come to her?
I brought it to her. I didn't really know what I was talking about at the time. I mean, that was my first one. You know, it's like, would you be okay seller financing? You know, I didn't have much money at that point. You know,
Interesting.
Pretty early on in the game, but yeah, I mean, it worked out really good, and learned a lot. I'm still friends with her. You know, I am generally, I become friends with the people I buy properties from.
It's because you're a nice person.
I just
That's
like
why.
people. I like people.
Well, he's also, I think you're looking at the bigger picture of, well, if I'm nice to you, you might refer me back to other friends. Other investors are usually friends with other investors.
So really,
and they might be old one time and
nice is
sell their
selfish.
portfolios off.
Well, and another thing that we talked about before the podcast started is, you know, I establish a relationship with the seller, and then either through them or through one of their contacts or through one of the agents that I meet in the process, I usually get more deals out of that. So the commercial deal that I'm under contract on right now is the person that helped us through that first transaction with that lady, that retired lady who brought me an 8-plex, who now is helping me with this commercial building. And I mean, that's the same thing. A lady, I bought her 7-plex 2 years ago. I'm buying her 10-plex this year, just because I keep that relationship going.
So good repeat business coming out of that.
Yeah, it's good.
You mentioned earlier on that you are a conservative investor, and conservative can be defined a lot of different ways. So I kind of want to like pressure you a little bit to like tell me like what's a conservative? Like I need to have a 20% return on my what is conservative, and how do you calculate that?
That's a good question. Being conservative in my mind, certainly among Utah investors, is I am a cash flow investor, and so that's why I don't have many projects here. Is because there's opportunity for better cash flow elsewhere. So I primarily look at is this cash flow positive day one, and then what is the potential, and I obviously vet the potential. So that's
potential meaning like the value add that you're gonna possibly build into it,
or forced appreciation through increased rents, right? Like doing some renovations and increasing rents or whatever. that
Okay.
looks like. Yeah. Is there any kind of deferred maintenance, or is there any kind of deficiency in the management of the property? So I always look for those opportunities. I'm a value add guy, right?
Okay.
In general. Yeah, so that's kind of where I come from on the creative side. Is I want to make sure that the property takes care of itself, so I don't have to continually have to keep feeding the beast until it turns around at year 5 or something like what some people do. So
Well,
it's just not my
I think
game.
that keeps your sanity.
Yeah,
Because
I
I've
like to
seen
see it.
guys that are doing that. Their hair's all white and mostly pulled out, and their eyes are always bloodshot, and they're drinking water.
White and pulled out.
I was seeing a lot of salt and pepper.
I wasn't gonna point to my head. Don't read into that. But I have done some crazy harried things. I'm not above admitting that. And I did have to feed the beast for a long time on some of my deals. So that's good wisdom. That's good wisdom, viewers at home. So we talked about different exit strategies. We talked about how to kind of evaluate it. Well, what more evaluation do you put into it? Obviously, you're looking for an opportunity to add value. You're looking for numbers and being able to make sense of those numbers. Okay, Are you the financial guy in your investing crew, or are you the dreaming guy?
Yeah, I can do it. It's not my favorite thing to do. I'll say I like to have someone else do that because it takes me a lot longer. I like to kind of dream up strategies and phases and the plan,
Yes.
and I like to make sure the numbers work, but that's not my favorite thing. So yeah, if like with this commercial deal, I'm the only one that's working on that project. And so it takes me a while to get through the financial analysis because I don't really love doing it these days. So, yeah.
Do you have like a
dreamer.
goal of where you want to be? Do you want like a certain amount of doors? Do you just want to keep acquiring as things come along? Are you trying to get to a certain point like on a cash flow type thing per month? Or is it just you're at a good spot right now that as things come up, you'll look at them and evaluate them? Or are you constantly hunting to say, hey, I want to have, 500 doors, cash flowing X amount of average? Like, do you have any of that stuff? Or
I was pretty specific with that a couple years ago.
When he was 12.
Yeah, right. I broke out. I quit my last job like 2.5 years ago. So that was my last one, and I was managing an investment portfolio here on the Wasatch Front for a group of investors. So I was pretty specific about what I needed to get to because I wasn't making what I needed to make at that point, with my properties. With that being said, I'm full steam ahead on my startup right now, and so I've got a startup business.
Which is what?
So my company helps small businesses qualify for and file for small business tax credits that are part of the pandemic stimulus bills.
What's it called?
ERC specialists. Yeah.
You're ERC specialist.
Yeah.
Linkable.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, so we're just helping small businesses. So that's taken all of my bandwidth right now. So real estate's kind of become a side gig, and anything that I make out of my business goes back into real estate.
Okay, yeah.
So, like, we're looking into multifamily, our investment group here. But like, what are the things that really catch your eye? Like for us, or for people watching at home? Like, what are things that like, ooh, I like that, I like that, I like that, I don't like that?
As far as
Just for you
a
personally.
specific multifamily property goes,
or do you, so you have a business partner or multiple with your wives and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Do all of you guys see eye to eye?
I'm not a political.
No,
Wait,
I meant your business partner's
How many wives do you
wife.
have?
Your business.
One
I didn't even
wife.
catch that.
We are in Utah. Presidio has one wife.
Okay. Do all four of you see eye to eye on every investment?
So we actually split ways the end of 2020.
Okay.
My partners and I, they kind of went the Airbnb route. And they do high-end themed Airbnbs, which is actually kind of cool. You guys probably like talking to them.
It's funny. I literally am under contract on a property right now to do a high-end
No kidding.
Airbnb in Provo.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
All their stuff's down in Florida and stuff.
Orlando's big.
Actually high end. Yours is down by a river.
Yeah, so
Do experience.
We're gonna lagoon theme it.
Yeah, it's a theme for me.
yeah, I mean, it was a great breakup, right? They were just kind of going that way. I wanted to stay multifamily and commercial, and so we just kind of parted ways. So most of my stuff now, I have some bigger commercial and multifamily partners that I'll do some projects with, and I just do some projects on my own now. Yeah. So.
What do you look for? What excites you? What turns you off?
Primarily I'm a value add investor, right? So I generally look for B2C type assets and opportunities
Can
for
you
improvement.
define any of this? Does everybody know what B2C type assets? I mean, if you're
Yeah, I can talk about that.
jump into that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so an A asset would typically be newer and operating
How new?
optimally. In my eyes, it's probably 10, 15 years.
So
or
it needs
newer.
no renovation, turnkey, and you go.
Yeah, pretty like
Perfect.
prime area, great asset, like no major deferred maintenance or renovations needed.
Which a lot of people coming into investing, that's what they want to go for. Like they're like, oh, I want a new property, so I don't have maintenance. But the more seasoned investors I talk to, jump right into the C's.
One of the big, I think, things to think of is, I know I see even within our own group that we talk about, is people look at what the value add could be in a C group property, but they only look at A's. And then they compare and go, well, I'm not getting the cash flow. Well, it's because you're looking at this one, not at this one, or you're looking at a C going, look at all this cash flow, but look, oh man, I gotta do
You do all these repairs.
I gotta find this, I gotta find that, and I think that's a big thing of understanding. If you're looking at an A, this is the type of dollars you're potentially going to be there. You just have less stress of maybe moving staircases to outside of the buildings and all sorts of stuff. That's more of a C class of where you're doing some heavily revamping to make it more profitable in what you're doing at.
So now let's hit, what do you consider a B?
So B would still be in like a good location, probably a good area, but it's older, right? 80s, into the 90s. Well, yeah, I would say probably 80s, 90s, early 2000s, and then C can still be in a decent area, but I feel like there's a mix, right? Like asset age and condition and location. Because you can have an A asset in a C location, right? And vice versa.
So you gun for the C's.
I look for the ugly properties in decent areas. So
Okay.
kind of my approach is, if we had to, like, would my family be able to live here without my wife killing me? Like could my wife walk from the car to the house and be safe?
Okay.
Feel safe.
So safe part of town,
Yeah.
little rundown property.
Yep.
That's your sweet
That's my
spot.
go-to.
And then you go in and renovate a little bit, or you're just like, slumlord.
I don't do that across the board. Across all of my properties, I'm always improving it. So there's not one that I've ever just left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Left it as
So do you have a basic price point where you like to get in, and a percentage of that you're okay doing repairs, or like, what's your window there?
It all comes down to the numbers, right? So I typically shoot for double-digit cash-on-cash returns,
Okay.
depending on the structure of the deal. So that's kind of my basic go-to, is like, okay, day one, depending on how much money I'm putting into it, is it cash flow positive? And then post renovations, post rent increases, all of that, what does that picture look like? And if that's hitting my double-digit rent increases at that point, being conservative as I am, that's when I get excited about it.
And I'm just going really dumb because I don't understand anything you're talking about. So you're saying double-digit cash-on-cash return?
Yeah.
What is that?
So I like to hit, at a minimum 10 or 12% cash on cash, which is based on how much money I put into a deal, how much money am I getting back.
So you put 100,000 into a deal.
That's not the loan amount.
Yeah, that's out of pocket. So down payment, closing costs,
Renovations,
Renovations.
whatever. Yeah.
So you put in 100 grand. How much do you need back?
10 or 12 grand
Within the first year?
a year. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking years.
Yep.
You want 10% or more.
Yep.
And that's where you consider it a good deal. If I'm putting in 100 grand, I need 10 grand back the first year.
Yeah, and truly, like, all of my numbers, including rent, the rent bumps that I think I can get, I'm very concerned. I'm on the low end of those always. Mortgage rates, I'm always on the high end of those, which is a good thing, especially right now.
Yeah.
Rates are getting crazy.
Dude, there's people that were pre-approved 2 months ago that are new construction that are backing out. Like a deal came to me today. Buyers are backing out. People were looking. It's new construction, but now it's gonna be done in 2 months instead of 9. Can we move on this? Like I got one of my loan officers is like, hey, how do we make this work? They were moving from conventional to FHA so they can take the higher ratios. But now the borrower's like, I can't afford this. I don't want to afford this. I know I can get the loan, but I'm out. So
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, I was talking to one of my employees today. Actually, he's building a house down in Payson, and when he was supposed to lock, it was like 3 weeks ago, it was like 0.75% lower, and so now his payment's a couple $100 more. And everyone buys at the higher end, right? That's just kind of a general trend of what they can afford, and it's pinching people pretty.
Well,
quite a bit.
I think what you touched on, like what we just touched on, is the numbers, running the numbers and making sure the numbers work and verifying the numbers work.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit of a story time, okay? Because
Yes, we do.
our last episode, we were under contract on an apartment complex.
are we under contract now?
No,
As
of a few hours ago, actually.
Well, we had that phone call. Well,
We had that. So, but this I think is a big crucial thing, because we had this 10-plex that was marketed to us at these numbers, and they had the expenses, it had the rents, it had, all the taxes, everything was there, even a potential of what the rents could be increased, and everything looked great. So we go under contract with them, and then we start requesting financials, and we start getting more and more and more, and then
we kept getting more and more and more expenses.
well, we're looking at then we literally laid them out and went,
this can't be right.
we have to be missing something here, because what we were told and what is being shown here literally do not add up. Like, it was almost like it was a different property. And we said, okay, we're tired of trying to guess on like what is going on, because it was being advertised at a 6-7 cap, and when you run the numbers, it was 1.1. And Tyler and I are sitting there looking at it going, we're missing something. We have to be missing something. So we
selling cocaine out of the back.
yeah, like maybe that's where the extra 7% cap came from. I don't know. But so we get on a phone call with the agent and the property manager of the company, of the unit, and we said, hey, look, you've sent us all the stuff, the last 5 years of all the financials. These are not making sense. You advertise this. Are these expenses correct? Like is this really what is being there? And his answer was, yep, those are the expenses. That's what they are every year. We went, you have any more info on that? And he's like, nope, that's what it costs to run it. We went, okay, well, let's move on to the rents. What is going on with these rents? Because these numbers aren't adding up. You have somebody who's been in there that's half the price of everything else. Why are they not kicked out yet when they're paying $400 when the rent should be $800? Why are they still there? Why are they well, that's just what the rents are. Why are you employed as a property manager? This phone call was like there to save this deal, and at the end of it,
how long was this phone call?
6 minutes.
Yes.
It was there. Like, it was it. And then Tyler and I, this was on a Zoom call, and we looked at each other on the cameras and went, so we'll have over a cancellation over to you here in a little bit. And they went, okay.
Yeah.
Click, and we called each other back again and went, I'm so glad we ran these numbers, because and requested these numbers and did our due diligence, and then going, even if we lowered the price, because this is where we started having the conversation, if we dropped the price by half, it still didn't make sense, because of it moved it to like a 2.7 cap rate. Like
That's
it,
crazy.
it just didn't make sense. And then we started going, okay, well, kind of like what you said. Okay, if we value add this and we raise rents to this and we move this to here and then we change this over here, we could make it work. But literally the stars would have to be aligned. And that right there, we went, that's not worth it for us. We're not going to gamble this on this for this. We're done. And we walked away. And being okay to walk away. We're not mad. I mean, we're bummed, but we're already looking at 2 other properties. Like, move on and find another deal that makes sense, because I think those deals that you want so bad that you do, you will not like those deals. So I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I heard from Rusty, from you tonight, is looking at those numbers, having that exit strategy plan in for multiple different ways of how could this deal work, and not, like you just said, you plan for the highest interest rates, the lowest on the rents. Yeah, you always hope for the opposite, and it might work out, but that's more of like, hey, that's now my Hawaii money. We're good now, not just to make the deal work.
So one more question. How do you bring up seller financing with the sellers? How do you sell that?
I will say it's a lot easier on the multifamily side and commercial, right? Most of those guys are more experienced and more savvy. They understand why it would benefit them. So you don't have to sell it quite as hard as a residential house. And most of them have done it a time or two, truly. So I'm pretty upfront, pretty frank about it. It's just like, hey, do you have any interest in doing a seller finance kind of deal?
So on that real quick, like Jason was saying, what does a seller finance deal look like on a larger multifamily one? Like, if you wouldn't mind sharing one that you've kind of done, or one that you liked or worked out good.
Yeah, so I've got a 48 unit down in Alabama, and that one was actually really good. We bought that, I think, back in 2019, very first part, and that was actually a deal that I found through a local contact here at ARIA, and it was just, I think it was just too hairy for him, honestly. Like, none of the local investors who owned all of the apartment buildings in the area wanted to keep that building, and so no one took it, and so they went with an out-of-town investor, and he said, no, this is too heavy for us, so my buddy and I took it on, and so that was actually a pretty good deal. We walked into most of the seller financing stuff already being set up for us through that initial investor that I got it through. We paid him a $100,000 assignment fee, and we took over most of that seller finance structure that he had already set up. So we got a 5-year note at 2.1%, and I think we came to the table with $500,000 down for a 48 unit apartment complex. We put in $1 million in renovations within the first 3 months, and so that was quite a project. And I was on the other side of the earth at that time. We were traveling, and so we were managing that project remote. But I mean, that seller finance deal worked out really well. You know, obviously it was almost very, very little interest we were paying on that note for the first 3.5 years, and we just refinanced out of that into long-term Fannie debt. So
how long did the seller carry the note for you?
about three and a half years. Yeah, so we got into that, like I said, the long-term, relatively cheap debt. We were at 30-year note with Fannie Mae at 4%.
Why did you ditch the 2 if you had 2 years left?
We saw what was coming as far as the rates and stuff, and so we got out.
We gotta get out now.
Yeah, I mean,
I'd rather take a 4 2 years early than a 6 2 years late.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, we missed out on some 3.5 rates, and we just didn't move quite fast enough. But it was a cash out, so we got about $1 million back for our investors, and so our investors in that deal only have about $500,000 in, and they're still cash flowing great, and everything's going really well with that. That was a really fun one for us. Learned a lot.
That was a great deal.
Well, and I think for me, the biggest thing I got out of that was right at the very beginning there was a lot of people who didn't like this deal. and it just needed somebody with fresh eyes to look at it. Just because 10 people said no does not mean it's a bad deal.
Right.
You looked at it and went, we can do this, this, and this, and structure it this way, and it is a good deal.
Right.
And now you just got a deal because all these people said, no, don't do that. Well, you just look at it differently.
Yeah.
And you can make it happen.
Yep.
And that's what I liked about it is I think that creative strategy, the creative financing structuring, learning how to do that, it was a little bit more complicated, a little bit more trying to figure out, but it ended up working out great.
So, what did we learn?
Well, my key takeaway is that you got to do some due diligence as you go into these properties. You might have the best dreams of how this property is going to work out, but until you do your due diligence, you don't know it's a drug house.
Yeah. Check the sellers to see if they'll finance it. Like, you could get an amazing deal. I mean, 2%? That's nuts.
That's awesome.
That's great stuff. So just ask.
Remember that just because somebody else thinks it's a bad deal doesn't mean it is a bad deal. You may just have to look at it slightly differently.
Something that really stood out to me was, being willing to look at more than one deal, right? Like not just trying to force the deal. There's a lot of investors, syndicators for large multifamily, they're looking at 100 deals for every deal that they actually take on.
Yeah.
So be willing to, stick to your core fundamentals as far as your buying criteria and be conservative in your numbers and be willing to look at more deals.
I want to add to mine, okay? For everybody that gets discouraged out of this, okay? You at the very beginning of this episode, you just had a Google reminder, a photo reminder. You bought your first multifamily 10 years ago, and you're at 100 doors 10 years later. That's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
To sit there and think, so you guys can do, and you didn't finance every single one of those yourself. There's partners involved, there's different things. Looking at it creative differently, he went from 1 door to 100 doors in 10 years and is also doing a startup.
Yeah, so he's not busy at all.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like you can do it.
Okay, wait. Rusty, what are the numbers again?
1 wife, 100 doors.
Yes.
Like, comment, subscribe. Tell us how many doors you have.
Or wives.
We're wives. We're wives.
If you want to get in touch with us, shoot us a text at 801-228-7687. Make sure you mention the show. You can email us at theutahrealestateshow@gmail.com. You can watch this show on YouTube, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you learned something, or if you really love this show, give us a like on YouTube and drop a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. The Utah Real Estate Show is a production of Hive Collective at Presidio Real Estate with support from Security Home Mortgage. The NMLS number for Security Home Mortgage is 178787. The NMLS number for Jason Christiansen is 240472, Equal Housing Lender. Not only is this not legal or investment advice, but you should definitely talk to a pro before you make any real estate decision. Every situation is different and should be considered in context. Copyright Jason Christiansen, Aric Wiszt, and Tyler Cazier. All rights reserved. Talk to you next week.
When we start talking that way, which I do sometimes inexplicably, we get a little soft on mic. But anyway, okay, we're
And
going.
I'm the one who doesn't look at the camera. All right.
Oh, thank you. Come on.
We have a fun dynamic on our show.
That's what we're talking about today.
I pointed.
That's right. Tyler?
This is why I have to do the.
I thought you made up the rule.
This
Yes.
is what I did. I can't. Short and sentences. Let's do that again. So that was good. That was really good, except for Tyler.
Mm-hmm.
How many wives do you have?
No, I just have 100 doors. 1 wife and 100 doors.
Okay, that's actually not a bad start. So
Wait, Rusty.
Hold on. Gotta wait till the concrete guy.
why is the
Tile saw.
Tile saw.